Thank you, everyone. I want to introduce myself. I'm Deanne Richards, and I'd like to welcome you to today's webinar on how to positively influence individuals to participate in HAI prevention. This is presented by the Lake Superior Quality Innovation Network, also called LSQIN. The Lake Superior QIN is comprised of 3 organizations: MPRO in Michigan, Stratus Health in Minnesota, and Medistar in Wisconsin. And we support the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services priorities for healthcare quality improvement. We know that all organizations are working hard on making quality improvements in your facility to prevent and reduce HAIs, supporting the culture of safety and improving communication. We hope what you learn today will help you be successful in these efforts. This session is being recorded and will be available in about 2 weeks. The PowerPoint presentation is available on WebEx, and we'll review on how to access that in just a moment. All lines will be muted during this webinar. We are hopeful to have questions and answers provided at the end of the session. So I'd encourage you to make any notes of questions that you have that come up while you're listening, and we'll respond as a group. You might also use the Q&A or the question and answer feature during the presentation. But I just want to make sure that you're being there and you're actively participating. And so you're welcome to use that chat function, and feel free to use your emotions and tell me how things are going. It's really hard when you're the presenter and you can't gauge the audience's reaction, so I'm going to rely on chat to help me with that. And with this, we'll go ahead and start today's presentation. So our objectives today are to understand and build a culture of safety, highlighting some motivational interviewing skills, and introducing methods of communication that will make a difference in your organization. But overall, my hope is that you will be able to describe alternative methods on how to influence individuals who do not conform to infection prevention practices. So we're going to start off with a poll question. What are you hoping to gain from this presentation? So operator, will you please open up the poll for me? I've given you some answers that you can use. So number 1, hear me now and believe me later. That's if you want people just to do what you say or do what I say today, and you'll figure it out later. Another answer I've got is just do it. So you just want people to do it. Stop thinking about it. Just get it done. Also, I've got you that magic wand there, so the bippity-boppity-boop. Just give me the magic wand or tool so I can make this happen. Or how about number 4? Go ahead, punk. Make my day. Are you ready to be the one that stands before people saying, we're going to make this happen, we're going to make it move ahead? And how about number 5? And now you know, and knowing's half the battle. So if you're a G.I. Joe fan, that may be the one that you're going to pick. Or maybe you're thinking this is more like number 6, champagne wishes and caviar dreams. All of these are options for you, and hopefully I can make all your dreams come true with this. But in the meantime, while we're having that poll being worked through, I want to have you go back to your last time in which you had a hard time working with somebody. What type of frustrations do you have, and what makes them frustrating? How do you react when you can feel your anger coming on? And my ultimate question is, what's pushing your buttons? So looking at our results, I can see that the majority of you just didn't have time to give that answer, but for those that did, it's now you know, and that's half the battle. So let's go on. So let me give you a little background. I've been working in quality for many, many years, and one of the organizations I worked for started a book club. Now, if you're like me, you start a row. Yeah, I read books all the time, so I'm probably a 2-book per week individual, but I like to read what I want to read, so it was hard for me to have assigned reading. But what I found is that going through this book club really changed the way I looked at things, both as an infection preventionist, as an individual also in quality. So the very first book we read was Whack-A-Mole. Now, if you're familiar with whack-a-mole, you know that you start swinging a hammer and you try to hit the head of anything that pops in front of you. And so it really becomes somewhat a metaphor for life. It's a response to predictable human errors. And it's all about no foul, no harm. So does this feel like what happens in your organization? So when somebody doesn't do what they're supposed to do, you smack them down, you say that was bad, and you go on. Many times you start swinging that hammer even before your investigation is started, and you cast a net to find the wrongdoers and brand them as naughty. Well, this presents a twofold challenge. One is that you're holding those who caused the event accountable, and you want to make those fixes to prevent those events. But these two goals are often at odds with each other because the prevention of future events takes the back seat, and we end up punishing individuals for making mistakes. And please know, we are all human. We all will make mistakes. So what's your ideal world look like? If we'd all just do our jobs correctly? If we would just follow the rules? If people would do what they're supposed to do? And now I want you to add, what's your favorite line that you like to say? Because in our ideal world, errors would not occur. So let's get back to the real world. Like I said, good people make mistakes. It's an inadvertent action, but it's lack of intent, and we convince ourselves that we're operating in a very safe place. So I'm sure many of you have heard the song, and you may start singing this to yourself when you look at the slide, singing, "Mama, don't let your babies grow up to be cowboys." I'm warning you right now, I really tried, but I failed. So this is my son, Chance. When you look at this picture, you may say, he's not wearing a helmet. And is it safe how he's sitting in that saddle? We have to look at all situations during the day for at-risk behavior. And kind of like you hear in the movies, at-risk behavior is more like a guideline than a rule. So at-risk behavior, there's no harm, no foul. The risk is deemed worth taking. We don't see the risk, and it leaves individuals as easy targets. So when you look at Chance there, being an infection preventionist and being in safety for years, I know that 7 million people ride horses, and about 75 to 80 of them will be injured while they're riding. And they actually have it down to a point of how many hours in the saddle and the type of event you do as to how often you will be injured. Of those that are injured, 15% are due to head injuries, and it's the number one reason for hospital admissions and deaths. And it makes up actually 5% of ER visits, so it's more than double than other major sports. And there's 100 deaths per year. Let's put this back on us. When you're driving to work today, did you exceed that speed limit so you could arrive earlier on time? What's your speed limit range? So if the speed limit's posted 55, you comfortable going at 60? If the speed limit's posted at 70, do you get up to that 75, 80 range? And what you do, does it depend on the other cars around you? So are you more likely to speed if the cars are whizzing past you than if everybody's going the posted speed? So I want you to think about the at-risk behavior. We do this, and we may not even be conscious of it. So let's go on to the next one, reckless. Reckless behavior is we clearly believe that the risk outweighs the rewards. So the risk is substantial, it's unjustifiable. The individuals do it, fully recognize it, and the risk is universally seen as outweighing any rewards. So be aware that the definition of reckless is shaped by our knowledge. So in this photo, you get to see Chance riding bulls. Yes, he's a Wisconsin boy, and he has a rodeo scholarship riding bulls. It doesn't mean Mama's happy about it, but this is what he does. You may look at this and say, this is reckless. And he would be telling you that, but Mom makes me wear the helmet with the face guard. He has a fully protected vest on. He has been trained in what to do and how to get away from bulls. But in the Mama mind, bull riders are 10 more times likely than football players to be seriously injured. And when they have an injury, it's a significant injury for every 15 events. Let's put this reckless back on us. Do you consider not giving an antibiotic in a timely manner to be reckless? Do you consider not cleaning your hands before you enter a room as being reckless? What if you keep an indwelling urinary catheter in place just so the night staff don't need to keep assisting the patient to get up to the bathroom? The definition of reckless, again, will be different for different individuals. So let's look at some justice that works. And if you're starting to say, hey, I think this is culture of safety, you're right on. For culture of safety, it's console the human errors. So those that are plainly errors, you console. You coach the at-risk behavior. You punish the reckless. And all of these are done independent of the outcome. So it doesn't matter if that patient develops an infection or doesn't develop an infection. If your policy, procedures, and protocols aren't followed, you need to start looking at what was the reason that it wasn't followed. We know what doesn't work. You need to eliminate the blame, the shame, and punish. Because when you do that, you're more likely to hear about what's really going on in your organization. And only when you really hear what's going on in your organization can you determine whether there's human error, at-risk, or reckless behavior. I also want to recommend it really starts with you. You know your own personal flaws. I know them, definitely. But you also have choices to make. But don't let that severity bias lull you. That's where I think most organizations are having a hard time, is in that culture of safety of consistently doing the same thing each and every time, regardless. So it doesn't matter if it's a loss of limb or if it is a catheter urinary tract infection. You treat them all the same. With others, you need to be fair and just. And think twice how you judge. I've learned through the years from doing risk assessments that my first impression, I never stated, because I know I'm going to be wrong. Because once I start delving in and pull the data in, that's when I actually find out what's really going on versus what I think is going on. Again, I have to say, you have to remember, you're not perfect, and you can't expect others to be perfect too. So what are our duties? Our duties are really to produce outcomes, follow some rules, avoid causing unjustifiable risk or harm, to save and to mitigate. Really, to put this slide into one word, I can't say one word, I'm going to go with 4 words, doing the right thing. So in Joe's culture, the way it works is that it's a blame-free system of justice. So it allows those employees to report behaviors while still holding them accountable. But you're going to notice the accountable is for reckless actions. The middle ground between highly punitive systems and a system where nobody has accountability for anything, that's what you're going for just culture. And if you do implement just culture, you will see incidents being reported more frequently. The second book was not one that was on my required reading list for quality, but it was one that I picked up when I actually went to a session on tuberculosis. But what it was on was motivational interviewing skills. And let's describe that a little bit more. You may feel a little discomfort when you move away from that comfort zone. So I'm comfortable sitting here in my office talking to you. But if I want growth, I have to push myself beyond that. So that means I have to do something above and beyond to actually grow. So that's kind of along my book reading. So I had to push myself because as far as I was concerned, there was no problems with me. Everybody else had a problem, or the way they thought about things was a problem, but it wasn't me. So you have to go beyond that growth area. But we do need that growth area because you need to feel uncomfortable to change. And each person's an expert on themselves. If they can find reasons to do something, it will increase their success. And allowing them a sense of control, freedom of choice, personal autonomy, or the ability or obligation to decide their attitudes and actions, that will actually help control their growth. It's not you. Our role as those around them are not to fix things. So in motivational interviewing, there is no superhero cape. You don't put it on and come save the day. You don't have popcorn ideas where all the ideas you have pop in your head and you're trying to make all these suggestions. In motivational interviewing, you don't offer solutions until they ask or until they reach a very certain point, because your main focus is being present that supports change. One of the areas that we've used with motivational interviewing is the title of oars. I love this picture because this reminds me, not only does my husband need to get out and see a little more sun frequently, but it reminds me of the first time that he and I ever went canoeing together. We ended up within the first 5 minutes not talking to each other at all. I'm always in the front of the boat, he's always in the back. A half an hour later, again, complete silence. This whole time, our twin boys, which you can see behind, they're in the same boat with us at the time, were sound asleep. And we were finally able to talk to each other only after we had figured out our movements with each other's oars of how it impacted each other. And that's how I kind of think about motivational interviewing. So let's talk about what oars means. So when you're talking to individuals and you're trying to help them recognize that there needs to be a change or a movement of that change, this is when we're going to use oars because it gets movement, it gets directions. So our first one is open-ended questions. So I like to use it, is it okay if I share information about the importance of, let's say, removing indwelling catheters? There are things that you want to use, so keywords are tell me about, or what are your thoughts about this? Don't use why. When you ask somebody, why did you do that, it immediately makes them defensive. The same way can. We've all heard, can you go to the bathroom? Well, I don't know, can you? Don't use the can either. But you can certainly use other words. The reason we do open-ended questions is you want them to talk, not for you to talk. So you're using it as a way for them to open up and tell you more. The A for affirm, we could use things such like, it sounds like you feel torn between removing that catheter and leaving it in. You're basically looking at positive values and characteristics of what they're telling you. But you're going to affirm they have struggles, they're trying to make achievements, values, and they have feelings. It should be a compliment or a praise. People know right away when you're being false. It should be a descriptive versus appraisal. And avoid starting with I am. Now my kids can tell you I've worked in psych for child and adolescent and adult, and they really got tired of me using I statements. This really makes me rethink all the I statements I've done. So I try to avoid using I am. But really, you want to tell them what you're hearing to validate that that's indeed true. The next one's reflective listening. It could be something such as, it sounds like you had a surgical patient admit directly from the ER and they needed to be prepped immediately. It made you change your priorities and it made it difficult to do that. Reflective listening is non-threatening. It keeps the focus on the content of your conversation. It deepens your conversation. It provides an opportunity to talk themselves into something. And that's really key with motivational interviewing is they need to talk themselves into something. It could be as simple as repeating or rephrasing, but it can be as complex as paraphrasing, stating an unspoken emotion, or even using a metaphor. For every one question you ask them, you want to try to do 2 reflections. The reason we do that is, 1, it forces you to listen, and 2, you are showing you are following the other individual, and you can hear, you're actually hearing. Because just like the saying goes that 80% of us, when somebody is talking to us, we are already putting our answer together. Only 20% are actually listening to the true content. So finally, the summary. So this could be something, if we could come up with a better system of removing catheters early in the day, it wouldn't fall on night shift to make sure they're removed. What a summary does is it aims to capture your key themes, change talk, so when they say, wow, I really should clean my hands before I go into the room, and it strengthens value. And you hit upon the key or main points and to be able to shift that focus. The other thing that we like to do is through motivational interviewing, and I call it a change ruler. When they come up with summary and you tell them back what you're hearing, that sometimes you may need to have them rate. And you start with this after you do a little more what I call explore, offer, explore. So in your first explore, you can say, what do you know about hand hygiene? Or what do you know about the importance of removing that indwelling urinary catheter? What have you heard about the importance of removing that catheter? What do you believe is your best option? Offer is only after you go through that explore. You only offer suggestions if they missed any key components. So it could be, well, how about since we have a checklist that tells us when it's appropriate to use that indwelling catheter, how about we look at that and make sure that we're doing all of those items? And you only offer it. You don't tell them. You offer. The second explore is where I would use that change ruler. And what the change ruler is you give them a scale, 0 to 10. So how important is for you to remove that catheter? How confident are you that you will be supported by following the nurse protocol that says you can remove that catheter in these situations? How willing are you to follow through or use the options that you've suggested? And the final question, or I can't say final, but I like to end with, why is your score not lower? You notice I didn't say higher, lower. Because again, they have to identify where they're at. And they may be able to say, well, you know what? I don't do hand hygiene only when the alarms are going off. So I do hand hygiene periodically. It's just I don't always find that I do it. So again, use that. But ultimately, we are going to want to end with a statement such as, so what do you want to do about this? Again, have them create the solution. So I want you to think about your last conversation with the individual who missed the opportunity to clean their hands. How differently would your conversation go with them if you first found out where that first individual stood and had a conversation and truly listened? Because we do know that what causes change is desire, ability, reason, and need. So I like to use darn. You know, poor Chance, he's in my presentation a lot. My family already knows anything you say or do may be used in any presentation at any point in time. So Chance asked for an iron and ironing board. A true cowboy he loves starch because his jeans actually wear better. And even if you have a scrape or anything while you're bull riding, your jeans really are very protective if they're in good shape. So he wanted the iron. But that's because he had a desire. He has the ability, he can stand at that iron at home and press away. And he has no qualms about doing 20 shirts at one time. And he has a reason. And he has that need. So when we're thinking about change, we want to think about how do you create that desire, the ability, what are the reasons, and need. So now think of this in advertising. When's the last time you brought an item because you saw it on the TV? Or your family members said, we need to get this, or this would save us, or this could help us. Same thing. We need to sell infection prevention. And each individual has a different need. So how you present something may be different. I always look at boys learn differently than girls. Apply that knowledge. How are you training your new grads versus experienced healthcare workers? Are you going about that a different way? Our next book was part of my book club was Crucial Conversations. And I will say this book had the greatest impact on me. Because up until this point in time, I knew I made mistakes. But again, I kept thinking that those mistakes were because of somebody else. Crucial conversation needs to occur when those stakes are high, the opinions vary, and the emotions run strong. Because basically our choices are to either avoid the crucial conversation, face them and handle them poorly, or face them and handle them well. Anytime you're heading into a crucial conversation, you want to start with heart. So focus on your own heart first, and focus on what you really want. I really want to be right is not what your focus should be. You have to make sure you have the right motives. You have to focus on me first being yourself, and then us being everybody else around. And you need to keep your focus and keep refocusing your brain. The problem may not be the other individuals. It actually more likely may be you. You need to remember you are the only person who can directly control yourself, and it is about you. When you find yourself moving towards something like silence or violence, because that's your reaction, I'm a classic silence person. When I get to that crucial conversation, I was, hear my mom in the back of my mind saying, if you can't say anything nice, don't say anything at all. So I shut down. That's not the best way to handle that conversation, and neither is violence. So screaming and yelling, and individuals who do this, is not effective. What we do need to do is stop and pay attention to your motives. So still with that heart, you need to ask yourself, what does my behavior tell me about what my motives are? Do you really want to win that argument? Or do you want to redefine a win-win situation? Are you more focused on what you believe than others want? And you will need to work with this person again. So when you feel that silence coming on or that anger building up, you need to ask, what do I really want from myself, from others, and where do I want this relationship to go? And lastly, how would I behave if I really wanted? So if you want individuals to be compliant with hand hygiene, what do you really want for yourself? Well, I'm sure many infection preventionists would say, I want 100% compliance. But that's not for yourself, it's other people. It may be, I want a better way of training individuals in hand hygiene. I want to be able to address barriers that prevent my staff from performing hand hygiene. So think of it differently about how you go ahead with this, because you need to take that step back and separate it. Because would really another lecture in hand hygiene help? Most likely not. Would yelling at people and ranting and raving at their department meeting on how bad their compliance rate, is that going to be helpful? Most likely not. So let's refocus. And the biggest thing we need to do is refuse the fool's choice. So notice when you start talking yourself into a fool's choice, and watch what you're telling yourself. Because you're going to need to choose between creating peace and harmony or being honest. Winning and losing. Now, I will let you know, I am the queen of sarcasm, and my husband's right up there as the king, and we have created 3 sarcastic kids. I try my darndest not to be sarcastic at work, because people would actually consider me to be serious. And I know on this presentation you have a hard time believing people believe me to be serious, but it is true. So I always have to look at how I'm coming across and providing that. You also need to think about how you are coming across to others, because how many times have you talked to somebody and thought about what you said or how you did it and realized that you really should apologize to them. But how often do we say, I'm sorry, I just destroyed your self-image because I wanted to keep my dignity. It wasn't pretty, but it was the right thing for me to do at the time. And how many times have you been on the other end and felt like that's occurred? So we need to be honest for us to move ahead. Because if we go with what's going to be best for us, most likely, we're failing at that communication. We also need to break free of searching for the and. So she didn't clean her hands when she went into the room. And I've seen her do it before. Leave the and off. Clarify what you don't want and add what you do want. And search for those healthy options. So you need to use your brain to solve problems and not make them worse. So how can you have that candid conversation and support the infection prevention measures? You may have to just simply state, I just saw you come out of the patient room and I didn't see you clean your hands. Is there something I can do so that I can help support this effort? Well, that comes across as a very different conversation versus clean your hands. You need to learn to make new choices, and it really needs to be based upon what you really want. So we're going to look and learn. We need to learn to look at content and conditions, both of them, not just one. We need to look for when things are becoming crucial, and we need to learn to watch for safety problems. So what does this mean? Well, we get caught up in what we're saying, that it becomes nearly impossible to pull ourselves out of the argument and see what's really happening. So watch for signs. So do you ever feel like a physical change in your stomach and it's tightening? That's a sign. Do you have emotional reactions? Do you get scared, hurt, angry? That's a sign. Do you see your behavior changing? Do you see yourself doing something different? For me, I hear myself saying the same lines that my mom always said. Then I know that I need to stop, look, and learn. Because we need to make it safe. And until we make it safe, the dialogue will end. But we need to move that dialogue. We need it free. And we need something to move ahead. Because nothing will stop a conversation like fear. And we all want to have a respectable conversation. So as part of look and learn, we're going to look to see if others are moving towards that silence or violence. And we want to look for outbreaks of your own style and stress. Think of communication. Without meaning to be silence, or forced to have a meaning, you're moving towards violence. So most common forms of silence are masking, so there's my sarcasm and sugarcoating. Another form of silence can be avoiding. So how many of you have turned that corner, saw the individual you just had the last discussion with, and turned around and went the other way? The other is withdrawing, so you totally pull out of that conversation. So violence doesn't mean that we're going to call security and have people taken away. Violence can be controlling, so you're coercing others to think the way you think. Labeling, so you can dismiss them under general stereotypes or categories, or attacking. So that's when you move away from winning and you basically make the person suffer. So we need to step out of this. And how do we do that? Well, when others move to silence or violence, we have to actually step out of the conversation, make it safe, and then go back to the issue at hand. So if you spot a safety risk as they happen, you can step out of the conversation, build that safety, and then find a way to talk about what just happened. The key, though, is you must spot the risk. And the first step to building safety comes with understanding of which of the two conditions is safe at the risk, and it requires a different action for each situation. So for the conditions of safety that are at risk, one of the easiest things you can do is mutual purpose. If others perceive that you're working towards a common outcome and goal in the conversation, that you care about, you are interested, and you have values, you can find a shared goal that you both have with a good reason in a healthy climate talking about it. So if you're in a debate, stop the conversation, say, let's come up with our mutual purpose. The other is mutual respect. And it's needed to have a dialogue. I'm sure many of you can experience or talk about an experience where you did not feel you were respected. And when you do not feel you're respected, it shuts down communication, because then you are not hearing what the person intends you to hear. You are making your own story of what you thought you heard. As soon as the perceived disrespect is in a conversation, it's gone, because you're already defending your dignity, and it becomes highly charged. So when we recognize that we all have weaknesses, it's easier to find a way to respect others. The last one, apologize. When you make a mistake that hurts others, start with an apology. It has to be a statement that's sincere, and it really does express your sorrow for your role in causing, or at least not preventing, pain or difficulty. This shows a sign of respect. But sometimes we have some misunderstandings. This is when there's a misinterpretation either of your purpose or your intent. Again, we need to step out of that argument and rebuild the safety by using contrast. Because often it is trying to remove an insult that's entirely unintended. And you want to use do-don't statements. So you want to address their concern that you don't respect them or that you have some kind of ill purpose. That's your don't part. You want to confirm your respect and clarify the real purpose. That's part of your do. So you may do something else. The last thing I wanted to do was to communicate that I don't value the work you do in the OR. So there's your don't. I think your work has been very focused on the patient needs. There's your do part. Thus, I was rather surprised when I found out that you asked the staff to delay hanging of antibiotics until after the initial incision was made. You're back to what was the real meaning of the conversation. Know that when you do a contrast, it's not apologizing. You still need to apologize before you start that conversation. So let's create some additional mutual purpose. What if we're at the crossroads? There are 4 skills you can use to get the whole conversation back to a mutual purpose. So you can agree to find that mutual purpose. And you can commit to staying in the conversation until you find the purpose that you share. And no, this is not easy. When we find ourselves at an impasse, we're asking for one thing and the other person's asking for something else. We confuse our wants or purpose with strategy. Why do you want that? Once you recognize the purpose behind the other's strategies, you discover your compatible goal. When you cannot discover a mutual purpose, you will need to invent one. And sometimes I've ended conversations with saying, I understand the reason that you would like to use this very specific central line, and I think you also understand what my concern is about. Could we instead do a trial? Or could we take this back to the ICU staff council and ask for some additional opinions or thoughts so that we can help move towards what we need, because we both recognize we need to lower down the central line associated bloodstream infections. When you join forces in searching for that solution, it serves everyone, since you're no longer using all that energy on the unproductive conflict. Another aspect is master your story. So what does that mean? It means retrace your past and notice your behavior. Notice whether you're using that silence or violence. What emotions? What's the story I'm creating because of that emotion? And what evidence do I really have? So let's say in the dialogue, when you're angry, scared, or hurt. I'm sure at some point in time you've said, they make me so mad. Those emotions are fostered by you, not them. Other individuals don't make you mad. You choose to be mad. And once you create your own emotions, you either can act on them or you can also be acted upon. Neither you master them or you're going to fall hostage to them. So if we take control of our stories, they won't control us. William Shakespeare said, "Nothing in this world is good or bad, but thinks makes it so." So with that rest of the story, what could we be asking ourselves? Am I pretending not to notice my role in this problem? This is my favorite. What would a reasonable, rational, and decent person do? What do I really want? What would I do right now if I really wanted results? So on that one, I can tell you that for myself, I had mentioned to my husband that I need to put things back up in the attic before I have youth over from church. Said, okay, I'll be ready in 15 minutes. Half hour went by, no husband. Now, granted, our attic means that we actually have to get a step ladder, put it into place, move the attic door, and these were heavy totes, so they were over 25 pounds each. And to do that, somebody has to be on the ladder, pushes them up, and somebody in the attic has to take the handle and pull them up. I'm like, the kids are going to be here in 10 minutes. I can't have this in my parlor because I need that space. So I coerced my daughter into helping me, and it was difficult. I got done, and I'm thinking, how dare he? He knew I had to do this. Why isn't he there? And I realized I didn't say which attic. So I walked out to the garage, and my husband's sitting there going, it is about time. I've been sitting here this whole time. I started cleaning the garage because when were you going to come out for us to put things in the attic? And I said, you know what? It was my mistake. I didn't tell you it was the house attic instead of the garage attic. So with those 5 distinctive states, you need to actually share your facts. Tell your story. Ask the others for their path. Talk tentatively. Encourage testing. So with this, it really meant that I had to, instead of make that conversation in my head, I actually had to share facts going, why weren't you there? Well, after learning that I had miscommunicated, it was easy for me to figure out what had happened. But sometimes you may have to go back to somebody and actually say, Terry, I thought that you would have this completed and done for me by the end of the day, and my head's telling me that since you took such a long lunch, maybe that's why you weren't able to get it back, and I off-pass with this. And Terry can say, actually, no, it had nothing to do with the lunch because our director gave me an immediate project that had to be done right away, and I didn't even have time to check in with you to let you know that I was going to need another hour. So those are things you do want to go ahead and use. You're going to notice that as part of this, the first 2 describes what you do. The last 3 tell you how to do it. The other thing we can use is AMP. So AMP stands for Ask, Mirror, Paraphrase, and Prime. What AMP does is encourage free flow of meaning and helps others leave the silence or violence behind and explore their paths to action. You start with the attitude of curiosity and patience, but this all helps you restore and use these safety skills to retrace other paths and take action. So here's my sharing those views. These are my twin sons, and you have to be careful about what you do in your life because your children will mirror what you do. So this is on ABC, which is another wonderful communication tool on agree, build, and compare. The reason I say you have to be careful of what you mirror in your life, I've rescued dogs and have had for a long time. So does it surprise me that both my sons came home from freshman year of college with dogs that needed to be rescued? I guess it shouldn't. But Using agree when you share values. So we agree that saving dogs is important. Build upon it. So if you leave others out of something, you have to agree where you share your views and then build upon it. And the compare, if you would do things differently, don't suggest they're wrong. Instead, you compare the two different views and move ahead. Another one is how we make methods of decision making. So you can do that through command, consult, vote, or census. So we can fail to convert the ideas to actions for two reasons. Either there's not a clear expectation of how the decisions are made, or there's a poor job of acting for the decisions, how they're made. Command is much more of decisions are made without involving individuals. Where consult is where input is gathered from the group, and then subsequent, you get some decisions made. And there's also vote, Robert's Rule of Order. So there's agreement on the percentage to help make that decision. As consensus also comes to agreement and then supports that final decision. And sometimes you will need to use all of these in different times. I'm going to skip this slide only because knowing how much time I have left, I do want to share the final book, which is Influencer. It is written in the same series as Crucial Conversations, and the reason I actually started reading Influencer on myself was because of how much I enjoyed Crucial Conversations. So if I talk fast, I'm hoping that you will forgive me. So how do we change the way we change minds? Well, one, we have to convince. So it has to feel like it's worthwhile, and individuals need to believe that they can do what's required. But then there's also personal experiences through stories, actually creating experiences. So when you have that catheter-associated UTI, are you using that story to help them change their minds about best practice with handling those indwelling catheters? And tell the whole story. Because convincing others to see the world differently isn't easy. But you need to instill a view, and it needs to be two of them. One, that a person will at least try to enhance the behavior or stop one. And the other is you're verbally trying to persuade. The reason that we look at stories is they are immediate and they're accessible and they are enormously powerful. Even so much more that stories have a greater impact and individuals remember them greater and are more likely to follow through than you providing statistics. Now, I love stats. You give me stats, I enjoy. But that's not how the whole world works. Stories give narratives, and they help listeners transport themselves away from the content of what's being said into the experience themselves. They are much more understandable than lectures. They can be more focused on simple reality of a real event. They create empathetic reaction, and it feels more like you're there, and you have part of those behaviors, or you identify with those behaviors. The work you're using contains clear language on the current behaviors and existing or even possible and the negative results from them. And it can also include positive replacement behaviors that yield new or better results. So there are 6 sources of influence. So personal motivation. So you're connecting vital behaviors to more intrinsic motives. Your personal ability, so you coach on specifics of each behavior through deliberative practice. Social motivation, the power of others to motivate and enable the target behaviors. There's the social ability. We need to assist each other to be successful. Structural motivation. So you attach appropriate reward system to motivate people to pick up on vital behaviors. And then finally, structural ability. So you ensure that systems, processes, reporting structures, visible cues all support that vital behavior. With deliberative practice, demand full attention or get brief intervals. Most people can only maintain a heightened level of concentration for only an hour straight. So don't make this where you're talking on and on for an hour and a half. Provide immediate feedback against a clear standard. It needs to be clear and frequently fed back is much more effective than once a quarter or so many hours of a practice skill. We need to break mastery into little mini goals. So concentrate on the controllable part of the process. Also, prepare for your setbacks. Build a resistance and gradually introduce tasks that require increased effort and persistence. build emotional skills. So take the focus off the distractive activities. So even in Weight Watchers, they say if you're hungry and you feel like you have to eat now, wait 15 minutes. Does it still feel the same? Or can you go ahead and skip those M&Ms today? Harness your peer pressure. So there's that ridicule and praise and acceptance and rejection, approval and disapproval. They can either assist or destroy your change efforts. And the power of one respected individual and model can create whole new vital behaviors for the rest of the group. Enlist your social support. So find out who's your opinion leader and what the key aspects are for them. Because be aware, those that influence you are most likely also influencing others around you. So use them to support. Make discussable, or I should say, make undiscussables discussable. Being public discourse and a healthy dialogue is much better than silence. And then become a opinion leader. So you do that viewed as knowledgeable about an issue at hand and trustworthy. So it goes back to that respect. They have other people's best interests in mind. You create a village. People must be plucked from their support structure and placed into a new network where virtually everybody is a new social circle. And this helps support new rewards for the right behaviors while looking at trying to avoid the wrong ones. We also need to look at deliberate practice. So that would be why the CDC really would like us to have hands-on experience for new employees inserting the indwelling catheter. But they also want it to be done, again, once a year. They also go on to say, you know what, best practice really is to have two individuals there at time of insertion. So one person's checking off while the other does that. The reason that they make that is there is strength in numbers. We can produce a force greater than the sum of our individual efforts with a little help from our friends. You can do this when others are part of the problem. You can do this when you can't succeed on your own, and you can also do this when facing challenges or times which you haven't been through before. Blind spots is basically saying, have somebody else look at your process. Have somebody else look or work with the group and provide you with some thoughts. And finally, design rewards and demand accountability. In a well-balanced change effort, rewards come third. The intrinsic satisfaction is actually first. The social support is second. So with many of these things, it crosses over into TeamSTEPPS as well as Lean. With all of these, you really are trying to strive to understand versus being understood. You also want to be looking at things 5 times to get down to that root. So that should be, for those using Lean, that shouldn't surprise you. You can also use some tools from TeamSTEPPS, such as the 2-challenge rule, which basically is voice your concern at minimally twice when something just doesn't feel right. Vocalize it twice at least. And even for when you do have concerns, like cuss is a really common one used, voice your concern, what makes you uncomfortable, and tell something about that safety issue. So in summary, no matter what type of fan you are, whether you're a Toby Keith fan, Dukes of Hazzard, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Star Trek, or Masters of the Universe, I'm hoping that you're leading this webinar feeling like you can influence others, but you need to focus on yourself first. Determine what you really want, allow others to find the solutions, all while creating that culture of safety. I've included in this presentation the resources, including the books and their authors. Unfortunately, due to time, I'm sorry, I tried to talk as fast as I could. We won't be able to open up the lines or answer questions and answers, but know that if there is anything within the question and answer box, I'll be sending individuals direct answers to their questions, so feel free that you can go ahead and use that at this point in time. My contact information is available. You're welcome to contact me by your preferred means. And operator, would you release the evaluation for today's webinar? This concludes today's educational session. Please remember that the PowerPoint presentation is available in WebEx handouts under events material, and the recording will be available in approximately 2 weeks on the website that's listed below my name. Please take a moment to complete the evaluation and provide your feedback to help us to continue to make these quality events. Thank you for spending your time with us today, and I hope that you have a wonderful afternoon full of wonderful conversation.
Thank you. That concludes today's conference. Thank you for participating. You may now disconnect.